Hi, I'm Jacob Muller, and today I'm going to be talking about The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Now, this book takes place in what seems to be a dystopian society in a poverty-ridden city that's basically controlled by a central lord and city in the middle that's called the capital. Now, every year the capital puts on this arena fight called the Hunger Games, where 24 tributes go in, and typically only one tribute comes out. Now, this year is the 74th annual Hunger Games, and that's where the story all begins. So, in part one of the biggest events obviously was the reaping. Now, the reaping is where they pick the two tributes, the male and the female tribute, for that year. And this year, Katniss's little sister, Primrose, was selected, and Katniss immediately said that she would volunteer as a tribute. Now, Peeta Mellark was the boy tribute, and at this point in the story, we barely knew who Peeta was. He was just kind of that bread boy, and Katniss pretty much felt the same way. She had like two past experiences with him, once at school and once in the behind his bread shop, and essentially what those two moments were to her were like in the games. She realized that those two moments were two of the biggest moments in her life with that person, because obviously she'd seen him before, but those two moments were what like inspired the whole star-crossed lovers thing from District 12. Now, once they got to the Capitol, they had training and the tribute preview, which that was basically their gateway to all of the sponsors that they were going to gain during the games, and that they blew the audience out the door. The audience absolutely loved them, and that later led to sponsors coming in and eventually saving both of their lives. So in the Capitol before the games, Peeta confesses his love to Katniss during the tribute interviews, which they do before they head to the games. So basically, that was the sprout of the star-crossed lovers from District 12, which was their whole spiel on what they wanted the audience to believe in order to get sponsors. And, well, it worked. So, props to them. Now, that was pretty much the bulk of part one. But in part two is where it starts to get really interesting. The games begin not too long after the tribute preview and the tribute training and the tribute training and interviews. Now, Katniss got a score 11 on her tribute training, her individual training. 11 is one of the highest scores, with 12 being the highest. So all of the other tributes were originally they were shocked. So she became a huge target in the arena for them, especially the careers, which were the people who had been practicing basically their whole life for this. And once they got to the maximum age, they volunteered, because that's basically what they lived for. Now, once they got into the games, Katniss realized that they were on, basically, it was really weird, because half the arena, or maybe a third of the arena, was what was described as like a flat, open plain, and then a cliff or a hill of some sort. And then there was a lake there, so that was the main water source, which is where the careers ended up basing. I know, that was pretty smart, because, they don't need to search for water. But, and then where she stayed most of the games was in the forest, which was the other main part to the arena. Now, she went into the bloodbath originally in with the bow in her sights, she wanted to get. That's all she wanted out of the bloodbath, and all she got was a tiny little pack with some rope, a sleeping bag, and well, eventually a knife because somebody threw a knife at her, which that was actually Clove, one of the careers from District 2, and she plays a huge part later on in the story too. But when she was in the top five, top six, she had the perfect opportunity to kill Katniss, and that's a huge part later on. But leading up to that, the game makers decided to start a fire. Well, Katniss was sleeping, and shortly after she had woken up, there was a huge fire in the forest where she was pretty much based for the last couple of days, and that led the careers to her, and so basically they were forcing the careers to meet up with her and vice versa. So that led to her hiding in a tree, which also led to Rue meeting up with Katniss. Now, where Rue plays a part in this, she was just kind of bouncing around from tree to tree. That was just her thing. And she alerted Katniss that there was a Tracker Jacker nest above her head in the tree that she was camping out in. So that obviously was kind of like because Tracker Jackers basically are modified wasps that can, in extreme cases, kill you. But after that, she decided to saw down the nest, or at least the branch that the nest was on, because the careers and PETA had decided to base right underneath her, which wasn't really smart on their part because they were all sleeping. Like the one who was supposed to be on watch was dozing off. So during the anthem, which played every night, she started sawing the branch, and then she ended up dropping the nest on them. And she said in the book that she thinks she was credited for the kills of two of the tributes that died due to the Tracker Jacker attack, which is where she got her bow, because one of the girl tributes that died had the bow on her. So while the other tributes were running to the water trying to get all of the infectious venom out of the stings and whatnot, she grabbed the bow, but she was starting to pass out. Her senses were completely going out because of the stings, and she ran into PETA. PETA ran back to the little campsite that they had set up, and he basically just said, "Run. Just run for your life," because the careers were right behind him. Now, that was probably his worst mistake. He later on, probably right after that, it didn't go into detail in the book, but probably right after that, Cato cut his leg deep down to the bone, and that immobilized him until Katniss found him. And even then, he was circling the drain. He was about to die. So that was probably his worst decision throughout all of the games. But after that, it was pretty much neutral. Rue decided to take care of Katniss while she was sleeping. Well, not really sleeping, but she had passed out from the Tracker Jackers, and she had fallen, quote-unquote, asleep for a couple of days. And that's where we meet Rue. They figured out later on that the careers had a huge food pyramid in the central location near the river, and so they decided to blow that up. Right before that, one of the District 1 tributes killed Rue, which obviously he died. Katniss killed him, but Katniss basically sung Rue to death. After that, Katniss was on her own. She ended up finding PETA in the riverbank. He was lying there, almost dead, but he was camouflaged because his excuse, or reason, I guess, was he decorated the cakes back at the bakery, and so he was super good at decorating and camouflage. So she almost stepped on him. It scared him, scared her. Even reading it, I was like, oh well, there's PETA, and it was honestly a relief. It to me it was more of a moment where it was just like, good, they found each other. PETA's not dead yet, and he actually has a chance of surviving, which he obviously ends up surviving. Later on in the book, they started to base up in a cave where PETA was just kind of lying there to die as of right then and there. Eventually, they played onto the whole star-crossed lovers thing. They started, doing all this affectionate stuff, kissing, hugging, etc. That led to sponsors that Haymitch got for them, which led to medicine that PETA got, saved him from dying, blood poisoning, saved his leg. And then Caesar Flickerman was the announcer. He called the feast, which had 5 bags, of the last tributes, and that was after he had made the announcement that, one, if there's 2 tributes from the same district that are still alive, they're both now allowed to win as a team. So there can be 2 victors depending on if they're from the same district. So at that moment, the only possibilities for that was Katniss and PETA and Clove and Cato from District 2. So after that, Katniss went straight in for the feast because she needed that medicine for both her and PETA. And so she just went in while PETA was asleep. She didn't want to, but she knew she had to. And that was where she ran into Clove. Clove basically knocked her out, not really knocked her out, but knocked her down and slowly started killing her, which is where Thresh came in and killed Clove. And then Thresh had the perfect opportunity to just put the rock to Katniss's head, and there goes Katniss. But because she had teamed up with Rue and sang her to death, sang until she died, Thresh decided to let her go with no more ode. If they found each other again, so one of them was going to die. Thresh very easily could have let Cato win the games right then and there because he ended up dying later to what we assume was Cato. And then after that, it was pretty uneventful up until the mutts or the mutations came, and those were basically genetically modified wolves almost, and they chased Cato, Katniss, and PETA, because by then the other 3 tributes had died. Foxface, Clove, and Thresh, those were all dead. So it was Katniss, PETA, and Cato. The mutts chased all 3 of them into the cornucopia, where Katniss and PETA eventually gained high ground over Cato, and they fought on the cornucopia until finally Katniss and PETA knocked Cato off, and that's where he died. And then that was pretty much the end of the recording, or the end of the games, where Katniss and PETA were just standing there victorious, and then they got to go home, which was incredible. PETA was really on his last string. He was about to die, but at that moment, they were saved by sponsors and by the feast. And then the fact that they were able to kill Cato was incredible. Personally, I think it really was. And that was the Hunger Games to me.